Another problem for atheists is that modern physics, far from doing away with the idea of God, may even glimpse of his hand at work.
He believes, of course...
Bernard Carr is a cosmologist and studies how the laws of physics operate in the universe. He says that the laws of nature are so finely tuned to enable complex life to exist that it is extremely unlikely that this could have happened. Carr believes at least raises the possibility of a tuner.
This is a diagram, it's called the pyramid of complexity, and what we've got here, we've got the different levels of structure in the universe. And at the bottom we've got the things like quarks that make up the atoms, and the atoms build up to make molecules, the molecules build up to make living cells, the cells make organisms, and eventually we end up with brains and consciousness. It's rather hard to estimate what the probability is, but it was clearly very, very unlikely that those fine-tunings which allowed this pyramid of complexity to arise would be there.
How did this come about, this rather terrific luck?
Of course, one of the first explanations that comes to mind is that there was a tuner or a creator, or if you like, God. And obviously for people of a theological disposition, the idea that the fine-tuning is evidence of God, of course, is wonderful.
But of course there are other exciting explanations as to why our universe is so finely tuned. One such idea is the multiverse.
We have the possibility that our universe might just be one of many, many other universes. This is called the multiverse.
To the average layperson, the notion of the multiverse stretches the imagination to a far greater degree even than the notion of a divine creator.
Well, that's a very interesting point, because if you do have millions of other universes, if you do have this multiverse, it's clear that you no longer need the creator, because you can simply say it's a selection effect, that we have to be in one of the universes which allows us life to arise. Now, in that sense, I think you might say that the multiverse is the last refuge of the atheist.
This idea of a mean to explain away religion is a good example of the atheist commitment to Charles Darwin. But I think they're pushing Darwinism too far, and I'm not alone.
My concern about this is that it seems to be a scientific theory being expanded way, way beyond its acceptable intended limits. Darwinism here is not simply a philosophy of the emergence of biological species, but rather a way of understanding everything. Darwinism is universal. That's a very interesting position. It's one that I personally have some difficulty with, because I certainly do not see the Darwinian paradigm operating, for example, in the history of ideas.
Day by day, the limits of Darwinism are becoming increasingly clear. Atheists hold on to the central idea of Darwinist evolution with quasi-religious fervour, but the fact is that the theory is getting on a bit. It's now 147 years old. And as with religion's ancient texts, many of today's scientists are finding holes in it. This is the Carnegie Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Its fossil collection is seen by some scientists as challenging Darwin's theory of evolution. And Professor Jeffrey Schwartz is a scientist who is turning Darwinism on its head.
Here we see...
Schwartz says the fossil record suggests that species can appear suddenly.
As well. In 1885 he does a study of Jewish boys.
One chap who found such ideas particularly compelling was Adolf Hitler. David Stack runs a course called From Darwin to Death Camps. He believes the Nazis took Galton's ideas one step further, using them to justify the extermination of Jews.
Is there a direct line between Darwin, Galton and Hitler?
There's a direct line. Is Darwin responsible for what happens under the Nazis? No.
Is there an intellectual connection? Then yes. Darwin removes the spirituality of mankind. He places man within nature. Once you do that, then you can begin to regard man as you regard animals and as you regard the plant kingdom.
You'll find very few good-minded liberal atheists arguing the case for eugenics these days. But why not? What's the matter, boys?
Back in the 18th century, a group of French revolutionaries, the Jacobins, did away with Christianity and sought to build a society based on rational thought. It ended in extreme violence.
Well, the first attempt to create a society consciously without God was made by the Jacobins in France in the 1790s with their cult of reason. It was part of a broader desire to sort of purify society. I mean, these were people, sort of deadly moralists, as it were, and you know, in order to implement their moral vision on earth, they essentially tried to destroy Christianity.
The Jacobins' moral position left them in no doubt as to what to do with their ideological enemies.
In Western France alone, they killed about 250,000 people who had attempted to adhere to the old religion. The Jacobins weren't having this. They just slaughtered them.
The Jacobins were not unique. Burley points out that societies which have rejected God have not escaped mankind's violent nature.
I think if you subtract God and you subtract the notion of an afterlife, then there is a real risk, particularly in the political utopianisms which we saw, which are so deadly in the 20th century. There's a real risk that you will attempt to create heaven on earth, go for a quick fix in the here and now, to have the arrogant illusion that you can remake man and woman into some sort of new being, and that invariably results in hell for ordinary people.
This is Vladimir Nikiforov, a Catholic priest who is chaplain at Royal Holloway College. He lived through this very same kind of hell in his Russian homeland, which was then a Marxist utopia based on reason. In 1974, Vladimir was drawn to God and became a Christian. Unfortunately for him, this put him on the wrong side of the communist state.
I was secretly ordained priest in organized community, also clandestine community in Moscow. That was in violation of the state laws.
Atheism has been an integral part of all communist states.
The party demanded atheism in its rules. You can't be a party member if you're a member of any religion, actually.
Do you think that that secularism can be as brutal as religious fundamentalism?
Well, it has been. Going back to the communist state, when the state wanted to exterminate religious groups, it did that with much cruelty. So if we are talking about the crimes of militant secularism, the list can be very, very, very long. Fascism, communism, they were secular ideologies, basically. And look what they did. So in this case, who is talking? We are all ideologies or religions. We all have criminal record in the past, and we should be humble about that, I suppose.
Atheists don't go out to kill for other people's beliefs.
Forgive me for mentioning Hitler, Stalin,
Catholic.
Mao.
No, they weren't.
Stalin killed 20 million people.
Yeah, but he was a Confucian.
Oh, come on. That is that is wriggling of the most ludicrous kind.
Yeah,
So it was an atheistic system.